let me go ahead and introduce you. So John Bracken is the Executive Director for the Digital Public Library of America. And he has been with DPLA since 2017. And he's currently leading DPLA through a very critical shift, which involves DPLA recently moving to their new membership model. And I know that he's also working very closely with the Director of Technology for DPLA, Michael Della Vida, who them together are working on some exciting projects. And Michael is going to be joining John in a little bit as well. So at the end of John's presentation, I'm going to open the floor for some Q&A. And if you still have questions, and please do ask questions. This is a great opportunity. We have John Bracken live, and you can hear directly from DPLA any mysteries you've had in your mind. What do they do about this, and what's going on with this, and what's going on with the membership model? What is their future sort of strategy around sustainability, whatever it is that you think about. And any questions that we are not able to ask because we run out of time, I can actually take them from you. You email those to me. I can compile those and then send them off to John, and maybe in a few days get a response to you that we can post those answers onto our community page as well off of our conference website. So, John, I'll let you take the floor now. Or the chair.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me and see me okay?
Yes.
Great. So I guess slight apologies for the space and the noise that'll be behind me. I'm at O'Hare Airport, where I do a lot of my meetings, en route to Macon, Georgia, to present to the to Galileo, the State Digital Library of Georgia. I would much rather be with you than in Macon in a 90-degree day tomorrow, but I'm glad at least that I can be here virtually. What I will do briefly is give you a little sense of who I am, why I'm here, a top-level sense of why I'm excited about DPLA, some of the things we're working on, and then partly because the timing is right. Michael actually and his team shared some stuff with us internally this week, some product that they've been working on in line with some new approaches that they've been taking on, building off of conversations with people in the network. And it struck me after he presented that Monday that it would be a great opportunity to bring him in to share with you all. As Kinza said, a big part of the value for me would be to have a conversation, as tough as that is in this awkward format. And again, another reason why I would rather be there in person, but we'll do the best to share what we have. So I'm going to go into presentation mode.
Well, thank you so much, John. I do want to say, just to give you an example of the landscape of this room, you can see some of the audience. We have approximately, I would say, 43, 44 people right now in this room today. So we're all very excited to be looking at your presentation in just a little bit.
Great. Well, I am moving into, where is my share? This is another reason I brought Michael in, because he's also my technical consultant. Michael, help me find my share screen.
It's that green button at the bottom of the window.
Oh, yeah, the one that says share screen. All right, here we go. Tell me, whoops. Let's just do.
I feel like we're probably the 21st century.
All right. Is it working? You see, you got me?
Yes.
All right, great. So I will just quickly to give you a sense of where I've been and what I've been up to, if my screen will respond. There we go. So I am from Chicago. I've spent most of my life in Chicago. This is a shot from a Chicago artist named Hebrew Brantley, who's been creating a series of characters. This guy's called Flyboy. They're based on the Tuskegee Airmen, and these goggles allow people, the kids, to see a whole different dimension in Chicago. I guess I mention it partly because he's that parable of Chicago of seeing multiple dimensions is part of the reality of where I come from, and sort of the grounding in Chicago as I think about why I'm doing this work is a big part of it. So I've spent most of my time doing philanthropy for foundations over the last couple of decades, mostly helping philanthropies and the organizations with which we have worked to think about the internet and its impact on society. So just to touch briefly on what that looks like, at Ford Foundation in 2000, we convened program staff from across the world to talk about mobile technology and to begin to have conversations looking at what we could see in Japan and South Korea, where mobile technology was already beginning to become present. How would that change the work that Ford Foundation cared about in terms of human rights and sexual and reproductive rights and free flow of information? I worked at MacArthur Foundation, where we did a series of seminars across the world. And this is a shot from northern Nigeria, where we did a workshop helping to introduce and talk about social media and its impact on human rights work and government reform and anti-corruption efforts of NGOs in Nigeria. At Knight Foundation, which is an institution that that came out of journalism, and a big part of the context in which I worked at Knight Foundation for the last 7 years was this legacy of newspapers and the fact that the internet had come and so massively disrupted the newspaper industry. Probably about a third of my colleagues at the foundation were refugees from Knight Ridder, which was a company by the time I got there that no longer existed, but the foundation was sort of the residue of it. This was a company that cared about technology and was one of the first newspaper companies to use a fax in the 1920s and 1930s, that invested in this pre-web tool called Viewtron in the 70s and early 80s. And yet so they failed and missed the wave of impact that the internet was having on their business. And so that current of work of working with the institutions and helping them think about the internet and what it would bring to their work and how it was going to change and impact their service to their patrons is a tenet of what I've been doing. And I think I'm also grounded in the reality of working within an industry that was basically, has been massively disrupted by the internet, and knowing that that's a disruption that's an impact that can face every industry. At Knight Foundation, we adapted to that as the world's biggest funder of nonprofit journalism. As we saw journalism change so dramatically, we began to ask different questions of different communities in different ways. We tried to unearth new approaches and new ideas towards how to help provide relevant information to communities. So that's just a little bit of a backdrop on me. The Digital Public Library of America we're about 5 years old. I won't give you the full history, but I'll give you a couple of just sort of highlights about why it's exciting and why I'm so excited to be here at this point in time. When we launched, it was through gatherings. It was very aspirational, and it was a set of actors in library world, in higher education, in philanthropy, in nonprofits, in open government efforts, and responding to two factors. I think one, the realization that increasingly, if information is not available digitally, it will not be relevant to a growing number of people, right? So if it's not online, it doesn't exist to me. I think that was a realization when we started having conversations 8 years ago. Second, I think as we looked around and saw the impact of private enterprise in collecting, aggregating, pointing to, and sharing information, I think we realize how important it is for the public sector to be at the table, and that it's not sufficient for us to leave these conversations and to leave the responsibility of providing access to information in private hands, in the hands of Google and the like. So the mission we were charged with coming out of our first meeting was to build an open platform available to anyone, to everyone, that would educate, inform, and empower this and future American generations. So it's a heavy responsibility that we've been handed, but the verbs of educating, informing, and empowering are, I think, central to why we're here. And for me, and maybe it's because it's this time of year, maybe it's because of recent events, I really think about it as an American, a uniquely American experiment that we're part of. And I think the fact that we're together is emblematic of that. One of the things I've learned in my first 6 months on the job, as I've talked to colleagues across the world building and driving similar efforts of national digital libraries, is we are unique among them. We're unique in our size. We're a staff of 15 people. Projects like Europeana in Europe are much bigger. We're unique in that we're not a government-funded project, right? We're an NGO. We get by with grants and our members and increasingly some earned income streams that we're developing. And on the one hand, that puts us we're at a bind. You know, Europeana, our brethren across the pond, just received 30 million euros from the EU to continue doing their work over the next few years. Unless I get really lucky or find a billionaire that I don't know about, no one's going to hand us 30 million euros anytime soon. But we're also uniquely American in that we're not a centralized authority. We're not doing all the work ourselves. In fact, we do actually very little of the work. We're about, and similar to our national spirit, we're about, working together, bringing across efforts across the states, across the country, in one common project, one common experiment. And so even though it's not as, not as easy to devise and not as easy to point to, and there are a lot of more moving parts because we are an association, we are a network, we are a union. I find it much more satisfying, and again, my sort of inner patriot, it really appeals to me. Before I hand it over to Michael to share a little bit about what we've been working on this year, I did want to share this quote from one of our founders, building off that American point about that. This was the essay around the time that we were launched 5 years ago. And in an essay that he wrote for the New York Review of Books, Bob Darnton, who at the time was the Harvard librarian, talked about the fact that DPLA is both utopian. So we have this, we have a pretty utopian name, right? A pretty aspirational name to be the Digital Public Library of America, but also pragmatic in that we're trying to find ways that we are serving actual humans' needs, that we are being responsive to members and institutions and helping them transition and succeed in a digital environment. Because we know that those institutions, that the values that we represent as libraries and archives and museums are vital set of tools and assets that we're going to need as Americans as we figure out what democracy looks like in this digital age. So hopefully you've heard a lot of the utopianism from me. Michael's going to give you a little bit more of the pragmatism, and I will hand it over to you, Michael.
Thanks, John.
Okay.
And Michael, would you actually pronounce your last name? I think I didn't really get
Sure.
it.
My family pronounces it Della Bitta. I think the official Italian way of pronouncing it is probably different, but that's how my family pronounces it.
I'm going to stop sharing. And as I stop sharing, I'm going to say two things about Michael and his work. I think one of the things, so Michael joined us about a little bit more than a year and a half ago. Is that right, Michael? And one of the things he's brought to us and that we've worked on is, and again, in line with the of America part of our name, is rather than building technology off on our own and coming out and sharing it with the field, instead working in a faster and more collaborative way with our members, with our friends and family, and building tools that are responsive to things that we're hearing about and being asked for. So with that, I will hand the mic.
Thanks, John.
Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for letting me talk to you today. Just giving a quick update about some things we've done earlier this year and some things that are sort of on the horizon for later this year, and kind of mixing them together. So I'll try to call out what's already done and what isn't. So I'm sure you all have seen our website redesign that launched at the end of March of last year. It was a collaboration between us and a Manhattan web design firm called Postlight, and we've sort of they kicked the project off, and we took it on and sort of finished it off and launched it in March. We at the same time also launched something we're calling the Pro Site, which is sort of a riff off of something that Europeana does. We noticed that our website was sort of like this intermingling of stuff that was targeted to what we call the professional community, which includes all of you, and to end users who are folks that maybe aren't interested in the inside baseball stuff of digital libraries. So what we ended up doing was breaking out some of the materials that are more for our network and for the field writ large into its own web experience. And we expect to add on to this site as time wears on in terms of making this more of a community collaborative place for us to engage with one another. Somewhat similarly, this is something that we have not launched yet, but we've been working on and are now in conversations with a variety of different hubs. We are working on something called DPLA Local, which is essentially a pared down web experience that we can what's called white box, or let a hub label it with their own branding and their own color scheme and so forth, and their own homepage. In cases where hubs don't have a web presence of their own, or they're more interested in letting us run that for them, this would represent, in this case, Recollection Wisconsin's collection in DPLA, and allow people to view that collection and that portal from a Wisconsin perspective, rather than drilling down through our website. So that's kind of, in the prototyping stages right now, but it's something that we're in discussion with a few stakeholders to see what that should look like. Somewhat similarly, another project that we've been working with a subset of our hubs on is our analytics dashboard. This is sort of a web experience for people who are working within a hub or working for an organization that contributes to the hub to see metrics related to their metadata and usage. So this is going to present some things that are available in Google Analytics, but other things like metadata completeness and API usage and stuff like that aren't already available there in a way that's easy for everybody to use. Something that's on deck to launch fairly soon, we've added list generation back into our site, and there's a new spin on this that doesn't involve logins, which is something we're doing for privacy reasons, but also because it gets around a lot of the new regulatory environment for websites and logins. This is going to let users essentially generate lists of items that they want to keep track of for their research projects or for whatever other reason. Likewise, we've also been prototyping some work around searching the index in new ways, and one of them is involving the use of computer vision and like color recognition technology to cluster images that are representatively visually similar in search results in a way that lets you see kind of like, in this case, this was a search that produced a bunch of World War II posters, but we were able to cluster all the Uncle Sam photos together. And you can see some Lady Liberty stuff down here. So we're investigating new ways of sort of like letting people drill down and see our collections in different ways. This is really at the prototype stage right now. We've actually applied for some funding around this project. On the back end, we have been doing some work to be more mature about how we build our search index, and in upgrading some of the search index infrastructure. So we're in the middle of a massive upgrade from a very early version of a search index software we use, which is Elasticsearch, to a modern version. But part of this is being able to regenerate our search index on the fly very easily. So we have essentially a push button, a setup that we press every week that reindexes everything from scratch. And the reason why we're working on that is that it makes it very easy for us to make changes to the way that the search index is constructed, to add new features or change the way the relevancy works, and that kind of lets us move very quickly, and it'll let us prototype new features really quickly. Alongside that, I mentioned there's the Elasticsearch upgrade. We are running something that came out a long time ago, and it's really showing its teeth. So we are in the middle of upgrading to the most modern version of Elasticsearch, and as part of that, we're actually realizing a pretty significant cost savings and performance advantage. So that thing I showed in the last slide that takes around 9 hours to reconstruct the index, in this new version with the newer software that we can use to talk to it, we can do that in more like 45 minutes. And we get new features out of this upgrade as well. So we're pretty excited about that. On the ingestion side, we're doing a lot on our new ingestion system. I'm not sure if all of you are familiar, but at DPLA, we've been through 2 ingestion systems in production. Now we're just bringing up our 3rd. And there's a long story to tell. And I think we actually did a presentation at DPLA Fest last year about that. But essentially, we're upgrading to a modern data framework for working with this data, and to ensure that we have the scalability to meet the needs of the network as things grow. In particular, NARA has let us know that, you know, they're going to be looking at something like 300 million records at some point in the next couple of years. So we need to make sure that we're planning for that kind of capacity growth, and other hubs in our network are growing as well. So this year we're focusing on really nailing down quality in terms of our data and geographic enrichments. There's a focus in this new system on data cleanliness and enforcing a schema, which is going to reduce some bugs and some, you know, quality concerns that we've had with the previous systems. We're doing a really strong push around building messaging and error reporting into the process, so that we are proactively aware of problems with the data rather than reactively. We don't have to wait until something goes up on the site to find out that there's a problem. And lastly, we're working on migrating all our providers over to this new framework. So that's all work that's going to continue on this year. And I believe this is last in the slide deck. We are working with a fellow from a Drexel University program to do some work on resolving all our subject headings and other fields like that that can potentially be applied to authorities to try to match sort of free text fields that we get from the variety of institutions we work with down to authorities that make sense. This is sort of like a linked data push. And we hope that we're going to be able to, at some point, you know, automated wise, resolve that free text data to actual, you know, Library of Congress subject headings or other schemas like Wikidata when appropriate. Okay, that's actually all I had, John, if you want to take the mic back.
Great. Well, I'll just to wrap up, because I think we're got about hopefully 10 minutes or so to, let's see, where am I? You know, just I think at a big level, I mean, one of the things we're excited about as we make the shift increasingly from living our lives, you know, increasingly living our lives digitally, what does that mean for our institutions? What does that mean for our physical spaces? Libraries are increasingly going to look, for instance, physically like this one does in, like Doc 1 does in Aarhus, which is an award-winning library that opened in Aarhus, Denmark, a couple of years ago. And what does that mean as our, I think it's a set of massive questions that are in the news every day, right? Both here and in other countries, about how do we make sense of these changes? These changes are happening so dramatically. We see it with our children. We see it with how our representatives are selected. And I think it's so vital that both the knowledge and materials that we've collected and the disciplines and practices that we've developed as professionals, as archivists, as curators, as information curators, as specialists in helping people find relevant information. Those values are really important and vital. One of the questions I'm beginning to ask is, what does it mean? You know, what is the combination of digital and community? What does digital look like in a community context? Today or tomorrow, we're rolling out the save the date for DPLA Fest next April, which is our annual convening of our friends and family. We don't have a theme yet. We're working on it, and we're putting together an advisory group. But one of the things we're talking about is this notion of how can we go through and have this conversation of digital plus community, and how do we put it in such a way that we're launching ourselves and exploring new stories. We're putting on goggles that allow us to experience new experiences, but that are also based on physical place and our physical reality, and grounded in our community experiences. And what's our responsibility as a digital public library in engaging on a community level and ensuring that we're having impact physically where we live. I will stop there right now, and happy to chat either at that sort of abstract level, whoops, that's a different slide, or talk to you about, you know, more specifically things that are in our, things that we're working on right now.
Thank you, John.
Sure, I'm gonna try to stop sharing here. Let's see, there we go.
So by the way, it's really interesting that you ended your presentation talking about digital plus community, because our theme for Community Day today is really the impact of what we do as digital humanists, as digital librarians, on people, on humans, and on community. So it really ties in with the theme that you're coming up with.
I planned it that way.
You know, you just knew what we were thinking. And thank you so much, Michael. I love your live analytics feature. It's really great to be able to go in and see what kind of activity is going on the MWDL portal right now. And I wish we can incorporate something like that into the MWDL statistics feature as well for usage. So I'm actually going to pass the time over to the audience for questions. So just bear with me for a second. Show of hands. All right. So would you say your name and your affiliation and then ask the question?
Yeah, my name is Tina Kirkham, and I manage the Utah Digital Newspapers project here, a repository of over 2.5 million newspaper pages. There's been a lot of talk about connecting DPLA and digital newspaper projects, what might happen, what probably won't happen. And I just wonder if you could just give us the 30-word view right now, or summary of where DPLA is at with regard to newspapers.
Yeah, and as you can imagine, I mean, if as I kind of rushed over quickly from my previous seat, you know, journalism and the process of digitizing journalism has been a big part of my work, both at Knight Foundation, which has funded some of our work here at DPLA around newspaper digitization, and some of my other spots. So it's a topic that I've worked on and cared about with other hats on. I'd love to hear more about your work and what you're seeing. I mean, I think in general, one of the things I'm learning about as I come into this position is you know, the availability of information, especially newspaper archives, is vital. I think, frankly, as from a pragmatic point of view, one of the challenges we're dealing with, and I imagine you are too, is how to prioritize digitization projects based on available resources, right? And that's been the biggest, frankly, as we've experimented and again have gotten a little bit of funding to do some newspaper digitization kind of scanning and information gathering. You know, our ability to go deeper and really double down, as you can probably relate to, is resource limited. So it's not been an area where, frankly, where we found at least not yet in my early transition, that we found resources to really kind of double down and fund more deeply. But I do think one of the things I'm excited about, and the fact that we've got that our network kind of up and running and is a tangible thing that we've convened and met together in March in Atlanta, is the possibility with us on a digital side and folks like you on a local side, potentially collaboratively being able to find resources together to be able to take on some of those projects and do it in multiple venues to kind of maximize both the sort of the messaging and the power of it, and as well as the kind of the ability to gather resources. I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but that's about as far as we've got, at least as I've gotten.
Yes, I'm seeing
Tina nod her head, so thank you. We have time for one more question. I know you're all just dying to
I'll
ask.
ask a random
All
question.
right. Anna Neartrower is going to
Yeah.
ask a random question.
Hi, this is Anna Neatrower. I'm at the Marriott Library, and I used to be with MWDL. This is more of a kind of a broad pie-in-the-sky question, but I know that DPLA does so many interesting metadata enhancements to the metadata that's harvested. Is there any thought of pushing that back in some way to the local repositories? Because that would be kind of cool, or is it more kind of up on us to maybe do some stuff with the DPLA API because the data is available and kind of figure that out ourselves?
I can take that one.
That's not random at all. It's very much germane to stuff that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I think that, so I mean, on a very strictly practical level, we publish all our metadata in bulk downloads by hub. So if a hub were resourced effectively and could make use of that, it would be possible right now to do that. But I think practically speaking, that, or in a different version of practicality, I guess, that's actually, a big if. I think that we need to start partnering a little bit more to make that possible, like to really make that possible versus just sort of like throwing our metadata over the wall back at you. So, I mean, that would be a really interesting project for us to partner up on. If you are a particular provider that's interested in doing that, I think we should try to pilot something where we do a little bit more on that front, because, in some cases we are doing some pretty specific enhancements or cleanup on the metadata, and it might make sense to bring it back into your personal metadata system.
And just because that wasn't very random, to make it a little bit more random, I mean, that was a pointed question. I do think in that question, or that nature of what's the nature of our relationship, where is it incumbent upon you to pick up the ball and where is it incumbent on us to do it? I think ideally I think that's still being worked out, right? And I'd love to hear more from your perspective about that. We're not, as I said, I'm really excited that we're not a centralized, uniform government agency coming in and telling you, here's the set of processes that we want you to follow. At the same time, it's, as Michael and Gretchen, who many of you know, deal with, it's the lack of uniformity does make it more challenging for us to design products that are relevant to everyone. And so finding that way to work together, again, hearkening back to Bob Darnton's essay, referring to, tying us to the early days of the formation of the Republic and figuring out what is the right mixture. We're not quite at we're past Philadelphia 1776 now. I think we're kind of more in the instrumentation phase of, okay, how is this actually all going to work? And I'm really excited to be able to, frankly, have that discussion openly, have the structures, a membership network, a set of active working groups that have stood up now. So we have the forays, not just at an abstract level, but in a real practical level of doing the work, understanding how we can reinforce each other going forward, and how together as a union, as a network, we all become stronger. That's my task, to make it a little bit more abstract.
Thanks. Thank you so much, John and Michael, for co-presenting, and hopefully next year you're able to actually make it down to Salt Lake City, or maybe we don't really know where the next conference is going to be at. Maybe you'll be at UNLV, but it'd be great to actually see you in person. and maybe even Michael. So, and looking forward to seeing you at DPLA Fest. And it's actually interesting what you said about, sort of comparing your, how big you are compared to your brethren across the pond, Europeana, because we always compare ourselves to you. We feel like we're such a lean organization. And I remember meeting with one of the attendees at the Network Council meeting, DPLA from Europeana, and I said, so you do great outreach. How many people do you have working on outreach and promotion? And she said, we have a department. We have an outreach department. So there you have it. But again, thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. Again, everybody, thank you for the couple of questions that we got. If you have additional questions, send them my way, email them to me, and I will compile them and send them to John and Michael, and then we will post the responses to those questions on our minutes website. So, all right. Well, enjoy and have a safe flight, and I guess you did a great job being that you're at the airport, actually. A better job than I'm doing. All right.
Have a great summer.
All right, you as well. Thank you.